There are some extremely bad signs for Battlefield 5, things that can in no way be presented as being anything but indicators of a game in serious decline. But two things first. One, if you watched my last video, you will have been expecting a positive piece of content about the great aspects of the game and exciting things to come for it. Well, that video is still being made, but this one now comes first. It didn't feel right to make that video whilst ignoring this. Secondly, I know it may appear like I'm milking negativity for views. I can now see that. I understand that it may appear like that from your perspective, but let me say this. I would much rather sit and talk about this game going from strength to strength. In Battlefield 1, you barely saw any videos like this from me, but I'm appalled by how this game has been run for 6 months now. Nobody can convince me that this game has been a success. I talk about aspects of gaming that interest me and I think are important, so here we are. But I also want to tag on to this, please don't go after individual developers and social media managers. They're just doing their jobs. Many decisions come from higher up, and if not, you still have no way of knowing who has made what decision. So, if you haven't already heard, Frontlines and Domination are being removed from Battlefield 5 as permanent modes. Two modes that were expected to be in the game and have been there since launch are going. So in this video, I'll go over the reasons being given as to why this is happening, what I think of those reasons, what this indicates for the game as a whole, and what we as consumers, DICE and EA can all learn from this. Now, you may not be at all bothered about seeing the back of these two modes. In fact, I'm certain a good number of you won't be too put out, as the main reason given for their removal is a lack of interest in them. Also, it's been stated that it essentially would require too much work to get them to a level of quality that DICE would like for having the current number of people partaking in them. But the problem is, people are still playing them. Maybe less than other modes, but people are still playing. I've seen many people say this from all platforms now. The response to the news has been fast and extensive. I mean, I play on Xbox for example, which isn't even close to the most populated Battlefield platform, and I can always find a game of Frontlines or Domination. So if people are playing them, why remove them? They say they can't rework it in a way they're satisfied with, at least not without extensive effort. But you're going to just remove it because of that? And stop people from being able to play it? Clearly they enjoy it either way, and how many truly significant changes have there been to the mode so far, if we're honest, in this game? What effort does this really save them if we're looking at the already established pattern? I mean, as far as I'm aware, they haven't even moved, or if they have, it's only recent, those tank resupply points that are outside the play area on a certain breakthrough map yet, or whatever the mode is, I'm not sure. The point is, so far, the explanations don't add up. So another one given is they'd rather people are playing and enjoying than being disappointed, i.e. waiting for matches or not being able to find matches. I've seen phrases such as, so as not to disappoint players, and what's best for people's time. And I'm lost here. If there aren't enough players for people to find a game, then they can't play. So they'll have to play a different mode. Or I guess they'll just quit the game, which may well be a telling point, and we'll get to that. But by deleting the mode entirely, you strip them of the chance to play the mode altogether. So does this lend credence to the idea that this is actually for the game as a whole, for the more popular modes, or just the modes in general? Is this done to maintain the ability to fill the lobbies of those more popular modes? Are we in fact on the brink of a real player number issue, and DICE have realised that they have too many modes to provide full lobbies and reasonable queue times? Is it about avoiding complaints because they can't or won't fix the modes? To reiterate, modes that people are still choosing to play anyway. So instead just delete the mode? Is it about hiding the fact that people aren't playing the game in reasonable numbers because of all the problems that have come before this? Now there's the mention of the possibility of the modes maybe being reworked and maybe being re-added. Apparently devs have volunteered to spend time trying to get the modes right. And I think that's awesome, I truly do. And it points towards people at that level likely not being to blame for this. But this also sounds like back covering for the company to a certain extent, or having it as an option if there's a huge backlash. Maybe it's just to reduce the hysteria. But if it were reworked and re-added after removal, wouldn't that just make all of this even more confusing, illogical and contradictory? What did this solve? And doesn't adding modes back in just split the player base again? It once again just doesn't all add up. And the quality over quantity argument has been offered. More time to focus on other more played modes, and this really says a lot. Just how many issues are there to handle that modes are now being cut, because they aren't seen as being valuable uses of time due to lower player numbers. Some people do still play them, but that doesn't matter enough. How thin are they stretched at DICE that this is now their best play? Something is very wrong, and it's been this way since before the game released. They weren't given enough time, and now here we are, with Battlefield's reputation far lower than the series is overall used to. Sure, all Battlefield titles release with big problems, which is an issue in itself and not something I see as an excuse. But I think this is a new low in terms of how the gaming public perceives this franchise. Now let's not forget a couple of things. Battlefield 1 has hundreds of empty servers right now, so logically this can't be about saving server money unless they're going to go and shut down all those as well. And also, if enough people were playing the game, this wouldn't be a problem anyway. And that's the crux of my point. Whether you want to point fingers or argue specific points or whatever else, these are atrocious signs for the health of the Battlefield 5 player base and the workload that DICE has. Remember, this comes after the UK servers for this game have already been removed, merging more players together across Europe. Think about that. A little over 6 months after the launch of this game, it's going to have less core modes and less available servers than it launched with. Nobody can in any way twist those into being healthy or unimportant signs. These things mean something. Nobody comes out before a game releases and says, this game is going to be such a huge success that we'll be removing modes and servers a few months down the line. Those two statements just don't belong together. Now I think there's also a problem in that there's an assumption that standard stock modes in the game at launch will always be available. I mean, these aren't weird experimental options, they're front lines and domination, and the product has been sold with these modes available. Now they don't owe that to the players, of course, but that isn't the point, because the players don't owe DICE or EA to play their game either. It's a two-way street. I've also seen it mentioned that apparently Frontlines handed out more XP than other modes, and I've come across one rebuttal to this as being essentially, we don't want people to be playing a bad experience just because they feel it's a better way to gain XP. And yes, I totally get that. So fix the XP and see if people still play it. Spend time actually fixing the game. Don't just take the mode away in case people are playing it for less favourable reasons. Or don't just take it away because it's not deemed as being worth the required amount of time to fix it. It was in the game at launch and some people want to play it, so make it a good experience for them. It's not as if there's like 3 people trying to play it, there are full servers. Now there's this idea that surely someone like me must be wrong because there's no way that they could be making all of these mistakes. Surely these must actually be the right things to do. Well, I urge you to remove that concept from your head. For almost any line of work, it's a fallacy. Consider the likely imminent end of optic gaming as we know it. That's come about via greed and total mismanagement by people with no idea what they're doing, and that example is also within the gaming industry. Other quick points are that 5v5 is coming, so perhaps the addition of that is scaring DICE when they consider their thin player numbers across existing modes. Then also that RSP plans to include these modes, so maybe they view that as a mitigating factor, or even an incentive for people to rent servers to actually play those modes again. That might just be cynical talk, I don't know, but it's a consideration to make. Now I would assume that player numbers across each mode likely aren't helped by challenges tied to individual modes, the introduction of limited time modes, and other such factors. And don't even get me started on the mess that is how Firestorm has been handled. But my point is, perhaps focusing on getting the core modes right would be better, rather than these modes that come in for a week or so and further split the player base. But I would hazard a guess that DICE likes these limited time modes because they come across as being more content, something else for the player base to get excited about for a short amount of time. It's a broken concept in my opinion, but I do understand why it's the case, and it highlights a need for things to be better from the outset, for both the quality of the game and how long the player base stays healthy for. In future, maybe a good idea would be to 1. Likely release with less modes if you're A. Worried about player numbers, and B. Concerned about whether you can execute these modes in a decent fashion. And then 2. The game needs to be released when it's ready, not when EA suddenly say, oh, we want this released a year early or whatever. Because look at where we are now. Not enough time to get the game in a good state for release, and all of these knock-on effects down the line. That's what DICE and more so EA can learn from this. And what we can learn is to expect nothing from games at this point. Each pre-order is a huge risk, and there's absolutely the possibility that we'll be massively let down. Also, some games will just release in absolutely sorry states, and no franchise is safe, no matter how big. If you as an individual didn't already know that by now, well, I hope it really hits home for you today. And when a game is good at release, and thereafter, absolutely enjoy it, sing its praises, and make the most of it. Maybe this can all get turned around with updates and more content. Perhaps there will be a resurgence, but that's a huge mountain to climb right now. The message I want to put out is how about listen to the community feedback on how to alter frontlines, for example, rather than going for this super complex idealized version, if that truly is why it's being removed. It doesn't need to be that complex. Tighten the playing area, reduce tank numbers on certain maps, move tank spawns on something like Hamada, alter how spread out things are on Hamada, or just remove Hamada from the rotation. These aren't particularly large alterations, most of them at least. Or what I'm saying is they shouldn't be. This is what developing a game is all about. Saying we just can't get that right or it isn't worth doing doesn't cut much ice with your customers. And then also, stop basing so many decisions on numbers and metrics, and instead start thinking about people. Not entirely, but at least include it in considerations more so. Think about emotions and experiences, about public perception, about the long term. Sometimes not doing something the numbers seem to encourage is the right move, so you don't start another PR problem. Look at what happened with the whole TTK debacle based around metrics. And I think that's really what I have to say today. I'm not happy at all about this one, but it's reality, and I'd like to know what you think. Share your thoughts on this one in the comments below. If you enjoyed, turning on notifications is the best thing you can do. Plus, obviously please like, subscribe, and join my Discord server in the description and my pinned comment. Here's the Board of Awesome for the epic people who support the channel on Patreon. They're all absolute heroes, and I love them all deeply and of course, often. If you want to join them on the Board of Awesome, the link to the Patreon page is in the description and my pinned comment. And with that all said, I'm GetGoodGuy, and I'll see you next time. Laters.